Those machines can suppress votes.
Yep.
Jesus. They can throw elections.
Ain't gonna be throwing them your way.
I want to ask you here on this stage tonight, do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. What I've seen is so bad.
I've seen a lot of elections, guys. Most honest, a few fixed. And you can always tell the fixed ones because they don't make sense. And this doesn't make sense.
She should not be allowed to run. And just in that respect, I say it's rigged.
So in one of the emails, John Podesta is talking about pizza. And I'm sure there's something very nefarious about that risotto recipe.
Mr. Rich was communicating with WikiLeaks before he was killed.
We have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States.
A high-ranking official at the DNC, when I called the police department, they got that information and called the Rich family wanting to know why was I snooping around.
Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
Now we're playing politics. All right, what do we do next, Morty, huh? Wiretap slush funds?
More people are discovering that the system is all rigged, that the voting is just pacification for the voters, and it really doesn't count.
You can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
What the Democratic National Committee did meant this election was rigged. Yeah, I think it was.
Brazil describes how Clinton engineered a, quote, secret takeover of the Democratic National Committee.
We recognize the process was rigged.
Donald Trump is falsely claiming he only lost the popular vote because millions voted illegally for Hillary Clinton.
Undocumented citizens, and I call them citizens because they contribute to this country, are fearful of voting. So if I vote, will immigration know where I live? Will they come for my family and deport us?
Not true. When you vote, you are a citizen yourself.
1.8 million dead people are registered to vote, and some of them are voting.
This is supposed to be just a little simple bit of election rigging!
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
I've learned that you go to bed at 2 in the morning watching a local election and the Patriot candidate's 10 points ahead and you'll wake up and they lose by 20. Yeah, it's just how America works.
Evidence of election fraud mounts as the mainstream media and Democrats loudly insist Joe Biden is still the 2020 winner.
Mail-in voting is fraud. All of this now has casted what is real significant doubt on the integrity of the 2020 election.
It is one more step in delegitimizing not just the incoming Biden administration, but democracy generally.
I believe the alleged irregularities can be organized into 3 basic categories. Number 1, lax enforcement or violations of election laws and controls.
I witnessed the room erupt in thunderous applause and derogatory cheering as Republican poll workers were picked off one by one and ejected from the room repeatedly by police escort throughout the day.
All Trump. Fuck Trump.
2, allegations of fraudulent votes and ballot stuffing.
What's all these? Are these mail-in ballots or what's these coming in?
What are these? These are my on tape here.
What's that?
Am I on tape as well?
And 3, corruption of voting machines and software that might be programmed to add or switch votes.
The county clerk came forward and said tabulating software glitched and caused a miscalculation of the votes.
Public has only a small idea of the kind of evidence that we have.
This allowed fraud and abuse to occur on a scale never seen before, using the pandemic as a pretext.
The Department of Homeland Security says the 2020 election was the most secure in American history.
The most secure in American history.
The most secure in American history.
The most secure election in U.S. history.
It was the most secure election in American history.
If we are right about the fraud, Joe Biden can't be president.
The AP has just declared that Joe Biden is the winner of the presidential race, becoming the 46th president of the United States.
China now acknowledging Joe Biden as U.S. president-elect.
The people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory.
President Trump has apparently fired Defense Secretary Mark Esper. The president announced the news on Twitter, writing, "Esper has been terminated and will be replaced by Director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Christopher Miller, effective immediately."
Just 2 days after the Associated Press declared Joe Biden as the winner of the 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump promoted Christopher C. Miller to acting Secretary of Defense on November 9th, 2020.
Christopher Miller was suddenly installed as Defense Secretary right after Biden won the election. It was this kind of a weird reaction to losing the election, right? Immediately fire the Defense Secretary and install a new guy.
Chris Miller spent his entire military service in the Special Forces, beginning with leading high-risk counter-terror operations in the Middle East. He oversaw the $11 billion United States Special Operations Command budget and 55,000 personnel.
What do the Trump folks think they can do with the military and the intelligence agencies in just these last few days? Why bother installing all these new ones right at the end before Biden gets in there?
Following uniformed service, he was a contracted advisor to the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence for activities conducted by USACOM.
This is why I'm enormously blessed and privileged to stand before you today to outline the next phase of our campaign to defeat terrorists who have perpetrated attacks on our homeland, including those who help and harbor them.
The plans and preparations for a communist revolution of force and violence are far advanced.
This is really the worst attack we've ever had. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center.
One of Miller's last assignments as an Army officer was as Director for Special Operations and Irregular Warfare within the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict. In this role, he was responsible for overseeing the entire United States Special Operations Command. Secretary of Defense Miller began working for the Trump administration in March of 2018, serving various roles within the National Counterterrorism Center. He became director of the NCTC in August of 2020, a position he held until his promotion to acting Secretary of Defense. While with the National Counterterrorism Center, he had a brief stint where he was also performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict until he was replaced by Ezra Cohen Watnick. Miller's background and expertise make him the perfect person to help implement a special operation such as devolution.
Let us remind those who question our resolve or may seek to interfere with this prudent, well-planned, and coordinated transition.
Within days of his promotion to Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller and Trump began making moves within the DoD and Pentagon that many considered unusual. On November 10th, Anthony Tata was promoted to senior official performing the duties of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy.
In preparation for this segment, I reread the national security strategy that the president's team put out in December, and it very clearly identifies China and Russia as peer competitors that are trying to take on more totalitarian roles with their people to fight off free people, free information, and free markets, and to suppress their people.
The USDP happens to be the primary coordinator for Department of Defense Directive 3020.26, which establishes DoD continuity policy and assigns responsibilities for its implementation. In other words, the very first position filled after Chris Miller became acting Secretary of Defense was the position that develops DoD policy and provides oversight for continuity of operations and continuity of government. Tata is also an author who writes Tom Clancy-style military thrillers. He published a book in November of 2019 entitled Double Crossfire. The book's description is interesting. In the most shocking scenario of our time, Anthony J. Tata takes you inside a brilliantly conceived, brutally executed plot to overthrow our government from within. We'll just call that a coincidence. November 11th, 2020 involved the promotion of two more Trump allies, Kashyap Patel and Ezra Cohen Watnick. Kash Patel was promoted to Chief of Staff for Acting Secretary of Defense Miller. He played a major role in uncovering the corruption of the Democrat Party during both Spygate and the Ukraine scandal. He was a legal liaison to the Joint Special Operations Command and played numerous roles in counterterrorism. As Chief of Staff for Secretary of Defense Miller, Patel would have been intimately involved with the operations planning. He was also designated to lead the DoD's coordination with the Biden administration's transition team. In December of 2020, Politico published an article entitled, "Really Quite Shocking, Inside the Ugly Transition at the Pentagon." Kash Patel, along with Secretary of Defense Miller and the rest of Trump's allies, quote, refused to provide information about current operations, particularly in the special operations realm. This was considered unprecedented in terms of presidential transitions. What was happening within special operations that the Trump administration didn't want the incoming Biden team to know about? On the same day that Kash Patel was promoted to Chief of Staff, Ezra Cohen Watnick was promoted to fill the role of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. While in this role, he also continued to serve as the Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict. He was working as both the UDI and the ASD-SOLIC from November 11th to January 20th.
We will ensure Special Operations Forces has a civilian advocate commensurate to the secretaries of the other military departments.
This means that Watnick was the top Pentagon civilian overseeing both intelligence and special operations.
This historic step finalizes what Congress has authorized and directed, and will put Special Operations Command on par with the military services for the first time.
He was also appointed by Trump to chair the Public Interest Declassification Board in December of 2020, a position that would prove useful if you wanted a timely release of previously classified information to the public.
Thank you, Anita. And good morning and welcome again on behalf of the Center for Health Security, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the World Economic Forum.
I would like to thank each and every one of you for your hard work and dedication to our cause. In reviewing this year's progress, let me say that we have been highly effective in conditioning the people's minds to accept our solution to the world's problems. The energy crisis here in the United States was exceptionally successful worldwide, and we expect similar success with our upcoming food shortage. Our labor leaders have made great progress by causing confusion and work stoppages in all areas of the world. The dollar is being devalued even faster than we could have hoped. Politically, the public has lost total confidence in any form of government. The threat of universal war is a daily possibility. As you know, we ourselves do not need to hold any visible office of leadership. As a matter of fact, it's better that we do not. We control the finances, news media, food, transportation, energy. We control everything. It is important that you, as world leaders, keep our program before your countrymen. With our World Bank and computer program operational, we now have the capacity to control the financial affairs of every human being on Earth by giving each person his own computer number. Anytime his number is used, we would know his financial situation at once. He could not buy or sell anything without his computer number. It will simplify their lifestyles tremendously. The end result will be a one-world monetary and government system that we alone will control.
People assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
The one thing that I have this strange notion, we are a democracy. Some of my Republican friends and some of my Democratic friends even occasionally say, well, if you can't get the votes by executive order, you're going to do something. Things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus.
The fact that Washington and the Washington establishment has tried so hard to stop our campaign is only more proof that our campaign represents the kind of change that only arrives once in a lifetime.
On November 18, 2020, Secretary of Defense Miller signed a memorandum designating the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict as a Principal Staff Assistant, reporting directly to the Secretary of Defense.
I'm here today to announce that I have directed the Special Operations civilian leadership to report directly to me instead of through the current bureaucratic channels.
This ensured Ezra Cohen-Watnick would now be reporting directly to Secretary of Defense Miller.
I also want to highlight that this particular change has been analyzed, debated, and refined over the course of the past 30 years.
Special Operations and Low-Intensity Units perform small-scale, covert, and clandestine operations. Ezra Cohen-Watnick was placed as the top civilian official overseeing our military intelligence and our Special Operations forces, and the red tape was cut for him to report directly to Secretary of Defense Miller. Remember, Miller's last role with the Army was as Director for Special Operations and Irregular Warfare within the office of the ASD-SOLIC. Secretary of Defense Miller knows the ins and outs of the Special Operations Command. He has personally led some of the units. He trusts them because he is one of them. He had the weight of the world on his shoulders, so he turned to the people he knew he could trust to get the job done. These special operations units specialize in, quote, protecting against subversion, lawlessness, insurgency, terrorism, and other threats to their internal security, stability, and legitimacy.
As president, I have no higher duty than to defend the laws and the Constitution of the United States. That is why I am determined to protect our election system, which is now under coordinated assault and siege.
This is exactly the group you need playing a role in a devolution operation. But there's another military group that is also playing a major role in devolution. That group is Cybercom. On December 7, 2020, President Trump signed Executive Order 13961, Governance and Integration of Federal Mission Resilience, and with it, he released the Federal Mission Resilience Strategy of 2020. This is where we find the most definitive proof of devolution, and we will cover it in greater detail in a later episode. But there is one quote from the introduction of the strategy, written by Trump himself, that we need to look at. Our adversaries will not attempt to fight us on our terms, and are adept at competing below the threshold of armed conflict. Trump was telling us with his devolution executive order and strategy that our election was stolen by groups operating below the threshold of armed conflict in the cyber world.
This notion that we have moved into a new global order that will be defined by fundamental competition between major powers.
Trump saw this coming and took the steps necessary through his executive powers to prepare for this.
But as I've said before, the truth is a force of nature. It's going to come out. It's all coming out. Hang in there.
Criminals that have seized control of our government carried it out. And nothing on earth is going to stop the truth from coming out.
They were spying not only on the campaign of Donald Trump, but Donald Trump as president. Now think about that. I believe that there is no possible way that you can be spying and monitoring computers at the White House unless you have the help of the U.S. government.
前边特朗普政府跟我们打贸易战，那么我们为什么搞不定特朗普政府？为什么以前1992年到2016年之间，中美之间各种问题都能搞得定？什么原因？啊，这儿我抛出一个可能又要是暴论了，就是因为咱们上边有人，啊，就是我们在美国的权势核心圈啊，我们有我们的老朋友。
To me, the deep state is that. It's just nothing more than the Communist International, in hybridized form, but ultimately with the same baseline agenda, which is the destruction of the West and the culture of the West, by means of a long march through the institutions, number one, and also the constant breaking of the morale of people in the West. That's essential to this, because it can't be construed as just an external attack in the normal way that one would think of it. But it's not something that we can't defeat, and that's the good news.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did.
Treason. It's treason. We did.
Is it a disadvantage for Republicans to keep talking about the 2020 election in 2022?
No, I think it's an advantage because otherwise they're going to do it again in 22 and 24. They're finding things that nobody thought possible. This was a corrupt election. And by the way, we put those justices there for a reason. And I will say this, the court system and the court decisions that are being made and will be made, it's going to be an incredible victory, in my opinion, for common sense. I think in the end, I will consider what's happening now to be one of my greatest achievements, exposing this corruption.
This looks like it's just a foundation. This is the beginning. They're building a building, and this is just a foundation on which a lot of big things are going to be revealed.
Why can't, after we win back the House, you become Speaker of the House, even for a short period, just until we can open investigations against Biden and the Biden crime family?
Well, I think a lot of things are happening, and a lot of very positive things are happening. And, you know, when you look into the future, and that was your idea, I heard it from you first. And frankly, I hope we don't need it, because what should happen is the plan that we're on now, and I think a plan that's going to make people very, very happy, we'll be announcing sometime later. And that's really what should happen.
By using this laser imprinter, we can painlessly and permanently affix the person's number to the back of his hand or his forehead if he so desires. For the purposes of demonstration, I've had such a number imprinted on myself. We expect some minor resistance, especially from highly motivated religious groups. But eventually, hunger will cause even the most zealous to conform to our program. Gentlemen, I believe that within a year, 2 at the most, our one world government will be a reality. If we continue on our present course, it is my opinion that we could present the devil himself as a world leader, and the people would accept him.
President Trump was certainly sounding the alarm about election fraud. But what was our military doing to prepare for a stolen election? The military took key initiative at defending our United States elections by elevating Cybercom to combatant command.
On Cyber Command, last week the Senate confirmed Lieutenant General Nakasone to be the next chief of Cybercom.
This elevation allows Cyber Command to report directly to the Secretary of Defense and gives Cybercom broader authority to conduct cyber operations. Army Lieutenant General Paul Nakasone replaced Admiral Mike Rogers as Cybercom commander and the head of the NSA.
Election security is an enduring mission for the Department of Defense, so the 2020 elections need to be safe, secure, and legitimate. We have to do our part to implement the National Defense Strategy by expanding the competitive space in relation to our adversaries. Now, we have a well-trained force, we have capabilities, and most importantly, we have delivered success. Cyber Command played an important role in keeping the 2018 elections safe, secure, and legitimate. Ensuring the same outcome for the 2020 elections is my top priority.
Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the 6th branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement.
General Paul Nakasone, who serves as both the head of the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command, confirmed that he has set up a task force to counter Russian cyber threats to the United States. Nakasone said a cyber attack from another government on U.S. critical infrastructure would cross the threshold into war, and we would certainly respond. The US government's definition of critical infrastructure expanded in January of 2017 when the Department of Homeland Security put election systems in that category.
Today, we face threats that have increased in sophistication, magnitude, intensity, volume, and velocity.
The article discusses Russia meddling in the 2016 US presidential election as operating under the threshold of war, because during the 2016 election systems were not yet in that category of critical infrastructure. That changed in January of 2017, before Trump even took office.
There is a theory that Kennedy's assassination was arranged by the United States intelligence services. So if this theory is correct, and that can't be ruled out, then what could be easier in this day and age than using all the technical means at the disposal of the intelligence services, and using those means to organize some attacks, and then pointing the finger at Russia?
To further perpetuate the narrative that the 2016 election was stolen through Russian collusion, President Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, classified election infrastructure as critical infrastructure.
There's still, however, a threat out there to our election infrastructure that this administration needs to address.
General Nakasone is telling us that since election systems are now classified as critical infrastructure, a cyber attack on election systems moving forward would cross the threshold into war. The Wall Street Journal published an article entitled, "Trump Seeking to Relax Rules on U.S. Cyber Attacks, Reverses Obama Directive." Mr. Trump signed an order on Wednesday reversing the classified rules, known as Presidential Policy Directive 20, that had mapped out an elaborate interagency process that must be followed before U.S. use of cyber attacks, particularly those geared at foreign adversaries. The change was described as an offensive step forward, one intended to help support military operations, deter foreign election influence, and thwart intellectual property theft by meeting such threats with more forceful responses. The article explains the obstacles involved in Obama's version of the policy. Critics for years have seen PPD-20 as a particular source of inertia, arguing that it handicaps or prevents important operations by involving too many federal agencies in potential attack plans. The Wall Street Journal article explains the significance of Trump's National Security Presidential Memorandum 13, which allows for the delegation of well-defined authorities to the Secretary of Defense to conduct time-sensitive military operations in cyberspace. Congress has also clarified that the President has authority to direct military operations in cyberspace to counter adversary cyber operations against our national interests.
I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius.
The Council on Foreign Relations posted an article discussing Trump's changes to PPD-20 with some interesting comments. With the elevation of U.S. Cyber Command to a unified combatant command in May 2018, on par with the Pentagon's other combatant commands, the logic behind the reported revisions was that the commander of Cyber Command should have authority to take action comparable to that of other combatant command commanders. It was reported that General Nakasone's aforementioned task force, named the Russian Small Group, would become permanent.
As David Hickton talked tonight, our world is changing. It's changing rapidly, and none more evident so in technology. And so as our nation thinks about what the future holds, think about the threats to our democracy today. The ability for our adversaries to steal our intellectual property, to leverage our personally identifiable information, to attempt to interfere and influence our democratic processes.
General Nakasone announced that the NSA would be creating a cybersecurity directorate to better protect the country against cyber threats from foreign adversaries. The move is intended to allow the NSA, which is part of the Department of Defense, to better provide information gleaned from signals intelligence to agencies and the private sector in order to protect national critical infrastructure. The NSA prepares to defend 2020 elections, drawing lessons from 2018, according to Big Country homepage. If there is an adversary or adversaries that are attempting to either influence or interfere in our elections, we are going to take them on, General Paul Nakasone, who leads both the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command, said at the annual Intelligence and National Security Alliance Summit last week. The United States Space Force is officially the 6th branch of the United States Armed Forces. Space Force served a complementary role to what Cybercom was doing. Air Force magazine published an article in July of 2021 explaining the role of Space Force. Given our unique operating environment, there is a special synergy between U.S. Space Command and U.S. Cybercom. There is no strategic level cyber capability without space. Creating Space Force was necessary to give Cybercom and the NSA the maximum capabilities required to defend our election infrastructure.
The constitutional process must be allowed to continue. We are going to defend the honesty of the vote by ensuring that every legal ballot is counted and that no illegal ballot is counted. This is not just about honoring the votes of 74 million Americans who voted for me. It's about ensuring that Americans can have faith in this election and in all future elections.
And so, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and half of January have come and gone, and all three branches of government are in crisis. The Congress is in disarray, the Supreme Court is down to justice and doomed to deadlock, and the executive branch is without a boss. The identity of the next president of these United States is once again in the hands of a bunch of self-serving, money-hungry, boot-licking, power-seeking politicians who can be seduced or sucker-punched or blackmailed into submission.
Mr. Curtis, would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Clinton Eugene Curtis.
And where do you reside?
Tallahassee, Florida.
And what is your profession?
I'm a computer programmer.
Would you please speak into the microphone so the audience can hear your testimony?
I'm a computer programmer.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for President Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I work for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that.
And when you say did just that, it would rig an election?
It would flip the vote 51-49 to whoever you wanted it to go to and whichever race you wanted to win.
And would that program that you designed be something that elections officials that might be on county boards of elections could detect?
They'd never see it.
Given the availability of such vote rigging software and the testimony that has been given under oath of substantial statistical anomalies and gross differences between exit polling data and the actual tabulated results, do you have an opinion whether or not the Ohio election, presidential election, was hacked?
Yes, I would say it was. I mean, if you have exit polling data that is significantly off from the vote, then it's probably hacked.
The Department of Defense published an article entitled DoD Has Enduring Role in Election Defense. General Nakasone was quoted in the article as saying, "We began the ability for us to defend the presidential elections not today, not 6 months from now. We began it the day after the midterm elections. We have not let up in terms of our ability to understand what our adversaries are doing." Army Brigadier General William Hartman, Cybercom's election security lead and commander of Cyber National Mission Force, said, "The biggest success out of 2018 wasn't the 2018 midterms. The biggest success was we put in place, both organizationally and from a business practice standpoint, a focus on an enduring mission to protect the democratic process." Hartman is co-lead of the Election Security Group alongside David Imbordino, the NSA Election Security Lead. Imbordino was quoted as saying, "We look at adversary meddling in an election on two different fronts. One is covert influence, and then there's interference. For interference, what we're talking about is an adversary trying to change a vote total, targeting election infrastructure, voter rolls, etc." Government Tech Review published an article entitled U.S. Cyber Command NSA Team to Keep Elections Secure. As the U.S. election cycle begins to heat up, the nation's civil and military IT security leaders are making it clear that they will be proactive in fighting back against anyone who intends to interfere with the process. U.S. Cyber Command's Brigadier General William Hartman said, "We are laser focused on any foreign adversaries trying to interfere with our election process." The DoD published a bulletin entitled, "For 2020 election, Threat is Bigger Than Russia." In the bulletin, Dave Imbordino was quoted as saying, "We're looking at the spectrum of all of our adversaries, Russia, China, Iran, and ransomware actors.
And this is not just about the Chinese, this is about the Russians, this is about the Iranians. These are all our potential adversaries who understand the things that underpin Western liberal democracies and are going after it. That's what keeps me awake.
Dominion Voting Systems is suing 2 more media outlets and a former Overstock.com CEO over lies and conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. Lawyers say they cast Dominion as a villain while lying about election fraud. Dominion already has a long list of other lawsuits underway over similar accusations. Those defendants have all
I've seen the system up close and personal for many years. I've been a major part of it. I know how the game works in Washington and on Wall Street, and I know how they've rigged the rules of the game against everyday Americans. I'm not a politician and have never wanted to be a politician. Believe me. But when I saw the trouble our country was in, I knew I couldn't stand by and watch any longer. Our country has been so good to me. I love our country, and I felt I had to act.
Considering everything we have learned, a very clear picture emerges. One can easily see that the military, through Cybercom and the NSA, both headed up by General Nakasone, was well positioned and highly prepared to address any foreign interference in our election. President Trump elevated Cybercom's role and cut them loose to operate as needed. We are at war with a foreign adversary that has infiltrated our corporations, our mainstream media, our tech companies, our educational system, our local and federal agencies, and nearly every level of our government. This is an information war. This war is happening right now, below the threshold of armed conflict. After the mainstream media declared Joe Biden as the official winner of the election, Donald Trump began moving his final chess pieces into place by putting the proper personnel in key positions at the DoD. The personnel with expertise in special operations and irregular warfare. General Nakasone said himself that a cyber attack from another government on U.S. critical infrastructure would cross the threshold into war. And our election systems are in the category of critical infrastructure. We are at a crucial moment in our country's history, and its very survival hangs in the balance.
2022年即将到来，世界期待中国，中国做好了准备。
The Biden regime is crumbling under the weight of utter incompetency as he and the rest of the corrupt globalists are scrambling to install the final pieces of their new world order. Our military was monitoring for foreign interference in our election, so the only question that remains is, was Joe Biden's election legitimate?
How confident should we be that this will be a fair election, and what are you prepared to do to reassure the American people that the next president will be the legitimate winner of this election? Mr. President, 2 minutes.
So when I listened to Joe talking about a transition, there's been no transition from when I won. I won that election. And if you look at crooked Hillary Clinton, if you look at all of the different people, there was no transition because they came after me trying to do a coup. They came after me spying on my campaign. They started from the day I won and even before I won, from the day I came down the escalator with our First Lady. They were a disaster. They were a disgrace to our country. And we've caught them. We've caught them all.
I would just like to know what you can say to reassure us that this election will not be rigged or stolen.
Well, I tell you what, it helps in Ohio that we got Democrats in charge of the machines.
It is not. But the other candidate is doing it. That's very interesting.
They called it illegitimate. They called it everything in the book. It was fine. When I say it, now here's the difference. Hillary conceded. I never conceded. Never. And we will all continue together to make America great again. We had it done. The election was rigged. They've undone some of it, not all of it. They'll never be able to do all of it because we'll be acting long before they can do all of it. It was up to them. They'd do everything they could to destroy our country.
You're not going to have a future if you don't solve the past. And we don't want the same thing to happen in 22 and 24. But what are we going to think? We won that election by a lot.
You guys know what this represents?
Tell us, sir.
Maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
What storm?
We have the world's great military people in this room, I will tell you that. And we'll have a great evening. Thank you all.